Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Today we're going to take a look at Thomas's collection. Thomas is an engineer and he has a collection that ranges from quartz watches all the way up to some very high horology. This first group are the quartz watches, and they have a number of different elements to it. The Hollands, the G-Shock, Bulova. Bulova's got the little Accutron fork on it, and then the Seiko. And these, again, are fairly simple watches. They all have a number of subdials and their own type of complications. The next ones are we're getting into the mechanical watches. The first one's called the Visitor, and it runs on a Miyota movement. And the Citizen is an interesting watch in that it's a quartz solar. Part of the power for the quartz movement is based on solar power. And so you have the battery and then you have solar power working together. The Patty Turtle with the Pepsi bezel on it is a favorite, and the turtleness of it is that flattened out case underneath the main part of the dial. And then there's a Sea Monster, a Seiko Sea Monster, and again, both of these Seikos have Seiko movements in them. The Sea Monster is a diver. It's a true diver, and the thing I like about it, it's got those great big numbers on the bezel. So if you're diving, having big numbers helps. This next one, the next group, here you have a number of standard horology, and it's sort of interesting. There's a Hamilton with chronograph with a 750, which is sort of a classical ETA. The Glycine has a GL293 in it, and it has a number of like the bezel, and then inside the bezel it has Chinese characters around the side, and then inside of that there's another 24-hour timer on it, and it's a GMT. It's an interesting watch. The Oris on the bottom down there also has an ETA 2671, and it has 3 subdials plus a moon phase. Moon phase, Thomas told me he likes a moon phase a lot. Interesting kind of function on a watch. Now, the Alpina has a Sellita SW200 in it, and I sort of like this watch because in my watchmaker's course, this is the one I'm taking apart and putting back together. It's a good deal smaller than that 44 millimeter case that in that Alpina, and again, it's a chronograph as well. This next group of watches, we're getting into some more and more interesting watches horologically. First of all, there's a Junghans, and it has the J810 in it, 810.5. It's an automatic. Now, these watches all have their in-house movement, sort of, all right? The Junghans is a relatively simple watch in terms of complications. Even simpler is a Nomos. Now, Nomos went through a number of stages. First they were using, I think, ETAs or something like that. Then they went into their, I think it was Alpha and Lambda, and these were pretty much copies of their ETAs. Not exactly, but somewhat so. And then the DUW series came out, and they were all designed and everything from the ground up by Nomos. And this is the 4301 movement with a manual movement to it. And the little, you can see it, they have an unusual, what are they called? The power reserve indicators. That little window right below the 1 o'clock is the power reserve indicator on it. Otherwise, I love these watches. They're nice, they're clean, and they're good watches too. This next one is perhaps one of the most interesting to me, and I think for collectors. What do we do with this Longines? It's got 4 retrogrades on it, which makes it interesting. 4 retrograde functions, in addition to a moon phase, a day-night window, 24-hour, plus a calendar. Now, it's listed as the movement as an L707, Longines 707 base. But it's made by ETA. ETA's name for it is the AO7L31. All right. The name of the watch is called this Saint-Omer retrograde moon phases. All right, not moon phase, but moon phases. What do we call a watch? I mean, how do we classify a watch in terms of horological value that has a movement that is not in-house, but it was made only for Longines to Longines specifications? To me, it makes a lot of sense in this way. Here you have some guys at Longines saying, look, we want to do something original. We want to do this with a watch. We want to have these retrogrades. We want to have this, and this, and they get the whole thing all set up and ready to go. But they don't have a movement for it. They don't have the facilities for making movements. And so they go to ETA and they say, look, here are the specs that we have. This is what we want. Would you make one just for us? And so they do. And that's not exactly the same as going to ETA and taking, something off the shelf that's used by 1,000 other watches, but rather this is sort of a special thing for Longines. Now, at the same time, because they don't have to invest in all of the equipment and all of the personnel and everything else you need for in-house, they can keep the price relatively low. So this is sort of to me, an extremely interesting way to deal with things. Now, some companies, for example, El Leroy at one time had Vaucher movements. Now, Vaucher makes outstandingly good movement, but they went in, took an off-the-shelf movement, put it in one of their watches that was designed in part around what the movement could do. And this is the opposite. You go in and say, this is what we want. We want it just for this particular watch and all of these functions together, and ETA put it together for them. So to me, this represents another kind of classification. It's sort of horology that's above standard horology, but it's not in-house. It's not the same thing that Nomos did when they said, okay, we're going to have our own in-house movement. We're going to have our people do it. Okay. Now, this next one is a Frederick Constant. It's got a FC 77.5 in for S for movement. It has several complications to it. It has the months, it has the days of the week, and it's got a calendar on it as well, and a moon phase. This watch, the thing about Frederick Constant, yes, they do make their own movements. They're in Switzerland. They were not too long ago bought by Citizen Watches. And so what about them? I count them definitely as strong horology, but their cases their gold cases are gold plated. And when you're using gold plating, you really you're not a high horology type of house, but that's okay. I've handled their watches before, and they have that nice heft that high quality watches have, and so it's a very interesting company. They're a Swiss. They were founded by a couple Dutch watchmakers who then moved to Switzerland so they'd have Swiss watches, and then they were bought by a Japanese company, Citizen. So I'm not sure where they are right now. All right, let's move along. Now, this next one the next group of watches is where we get into really very interesting watches, and we're getting into certainly strong horology, and I think the Jaeger-LeCoultre would be clearly high horology. Now, the first one is a Mont Blanc. Now, Mont Blanc went through a phase where they were using other people's movements, but this is one of their own movements that they have, an MBR 200. And the Nicholas Riusek, if that's sort of the series that has these in-house movements. They have some other ones that do as well. But this one is a neat design. This is a unique watch. I love this watch. And they're generally fairly well priced, especially on the pre-owned market or on the secondary markets. Breitling. There's a Breitling travel watch. And it's got around the edges, it has the different cities and so forth, and it has a chronograph and all kinds of other things with it as well. This watch, now Breitling is one of those companies that I always grumble about because some of their watches are not in-house, but they don't tell you that, and so that always upsets me. All right, if you're going to pay high strong horology prices, you should get an in-house movement. Well, this is that. This is one of the good ones, in my opinion. It has a AB 0510, and it's based on the B05, which is one of the Breitling in-house base movements. And it's, for a travel watch, I think it's okay. And it does things that you want a travel watch to do, dual time, and also too you can set the time to different places. So that's a neat watch. Now the next one down at the lower left is my favorite, or one of my favorites. I'll put it that way because I got some other favorites as well. And this is a rattrapante. I didn't realize until I saw Thomas's Omega that this is a rattrapante. It's got the movement is a 3312, and the base that's used in other rattrapantes by Omega is a 3313. Here you have something about a rattrapante. I know that a rattrapante is mechanically is quite a challenge, and here it is, and I'm sure that given the fact that Omegas aren't quite as expensive as some of these other ones, that this is a neat one. Now this is also in a DeVille, and I happen to like DeVilles a lot. They're one of my favorite style Omegas. I know that Seamaster and all of these other ones are ones that are Speedmaster. These are the ones that are the most popular, but you shouldn't overlook some really neat other watches or other models by Omega, and this is one of them. I would certainly say, hey, this is really cool. It's got a rattrapante in it. The last one on this group is a Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso, classic watch in every way. In-house movement, the JLC 853A, and you really have two watches, and this is the night and day. During the day, you can wear it with the white side up, and then at night you can wear it with the dark side up. And for different outfits, for formal, you'd wear the dark side for a dinner party or something. And it just to me is a tremendous watch. Plus, it has a moon phase. This is something that Thomas said he likes. He likes moon phases, and because it's an added function or complication to a watch. So that certainly has that. Okay. This final one was recently added, and it's one of my favorite. I have on my Kalpa. This is a Parmigiani Kalpa Hebdo Madara, and to me it's one of my favorite Parmigiani watches. First of all, one of the things about this particular watch is my version is that it's got a round movement, and it's a movement. Michael Parmigiani's first movement that he did, and it's used in a number of Parmigiani watches. It's a very good movement. Now, the sign of a really excellent movement is, you can see that in this watch, and this is where the case and the shape of the watch are the same. The same is true with round watches. You have a round watch with a little bitty movement. That's not as good as one that fills it. For example, this FP Journe it fills it right up. And in terms of shape, this H Moser, same thing as in Thomas's Parmigiani. And the watch itself it has my favorite function. It has two of my favorite things. First of all, I really like mechanical watches. In fact, this is one of the few automatics that I have. Most of mine are mechanical. I wind them up. And this one has hebdomadaire, means weekly, and so you wind it up once a week, and you can see the power reserve indicator at the top in a retrograde, and that will tell you how much winding you have left. Now it has 8 days, and so you can use it a full 7 days, and then on the 8th day wind it up again. All right, well, this collection to me is a wonderful collection, and Thomas has great taste. He shares something with me, and that is, they don't care if it's a popular model or a popular brand. If it's a good high horology or it's an interesting watch, that's the kind to get. Now, he also put them on sort of a stratified tier that he set them up on, which I think is sort of cool too. So he has a record of them on like a spreadsheet application. Now, what would I suggest for this collection? Well, I certainly would suggest the Parmigiani that he got. And where do you go next with this? Well, one place I would go is you can find some good buys on some of the older Mosers. I don't mean in the 50s, but like in the 2010s, the early 2010s, or even in, I don't know if they sort of came back out of nowhere. The ones from the 50s, and you can forget about those. The newer ones, and especially the ones that are not as popular, have really good prices. Okay, would be one recommendation. Some other ones, this is the finding good watches in really good horological examples. You find the Nomos, I think, is a great example of a very good watch. And again, they're making their own movements now. The Parmigiani, H. Moser, these watches are at another level. Very, in the sense that they have their own movements, you can find some good deals. There's some other ones too. That Omega with the rattrapantes, I think, is it's a good choice. So it doesn't really need a lot of advice from me. What are some of the ideas that you have? Now remember, Thomas likes complications. I'm the opposite. Fewer complications I'm quite happy with. And hey, if you'd like to subscribe, this is an invitation. Well, until next Friday, this is Bill Sanders with Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Hope to see you then.